Those are nice and fat. Towering beauty. This is the hard neck variety. Got at least 2 more of these, so let's go get them. Hi, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So we are in our 3rd week of our garden tours of this season, but it's not the 3rd week of the garden in total. A couple of these things have been growing in here for a couple months at least, and it's harvest day. We'll be harvesting garlic and cabbage, some peas. I've already harvested a little bit of chamomile today, and who knows what other surprises we're gonna find, but I have that on my agenda in the very least. So first things first, here on the arch trellis that leads into our raised bed garden are the peas. So this is my first year growing shelling peas, and I noticed in the last week that some of the peas look like they're already starting to die back. So this could be very well normal for them. I didn't expect them to really put on multiple flushes of blooms. Usually when you let a plant flower, put on its pods or its fruit, and then go to seed, the plant's job is done and it knows that. And so it puts its energy into maturing the seeds inside the pods instead of putting on new flowers. So a few of these pods are looking nice and juicy. We are harvesting these pea pods for the peas on the inside, and I'm really just kind of looking for the nice fat ones like this. You can really tell that the peas inside are ready to be shelled. Oh, that's tough. There we go. When it comes to shelling these peas, all I'm going to do is kind of push with my thumb at the base of the pea here. This is where it was attached to the plant, and if I push lightly here, kind of cracks open that seam, and I can open it up. Ooh, usually it's a little easier than this. Here we go. And look at all those perfect little peas in the pod. Those are nice and fat. So all I'm gonna do is harvest these pods, and I'll shell them just like that later. What I plan to do is actually blanch and then freeze dry these peas. We're not gonna get gallons and gallons of peas off of these 2 trellises, but I hope just to get a little bit that we can add into meals like chicken pot pie and casseroles and stuff like that. I have some very fond memories of harvesting and shelling peas like this with my grandfather. So Grampy Jim, I'm thinking of you. This one's kind of fat. Oh, normal peas inside. Just a funny shaped pod. Look at that. Not too bad for our first little harvest. I'd say it's probably about a half gallon's worth of peas in the pod. I'm not exactly sure what it's gonna be once we shell them, but I have another couple weeks of shelling or of picking still to do here. The flowers didn't all bloom and come on at the same time, and so not all of the peas are going to be harvestable at the same time. See, some of them are still quite thin, so we still have quite a harvest left. Look at these. This side has lots of them too, and look what I found among the peas the other day. I cannot believe this entire tomato plant was hiding in here. That's not a small plant. Along the trellis here last year, I grew some Belgian giant tomatoes. It's my favorite heirloom tomato variety. Someone had asked where I buy the seeds. I purchased them from M.I. Gardener, but this is an heirloom variety, and so I have been saving the seeds back ever since I purchased the first pack of seeds. It's not really going to be in the way of anything else that I'm growing here on this trellis, and I'd kind of like to see if we can get a couple extra tomatoes out of it. Okay, on to the next harvest. I think we're going to get a couple cabbages today, 2 or 3. This one is definitely ready. So you can tell a cabbage is ready to be harvested kind of based on the size and based on the firmness. So as these cabbages are growing and putting on their heads, I come by and give them a little squeeze, and you can feel when there's quite a lot of give and it's not as firm as it's really supposed to be. This one is nice and firm. And also we are starting to see some caterpillars coming out, so I'd really love to harvest these before the caterpillars get real bad. And I have never done the twisting method of harvest, so we're gonna try that out today. I'm just gonna grab the head and give it a twist. That seemed to work really well. Perfect. Well, that worked incredibly well. So I am going to take off these outer leaves and just take the head inside. So I'm just gonna turn it over and peel off. Ooh. I don't know if you guys like spiders. I happen to like spiders. Go on, baby. There we go. She's safe over there. Oh, all right, perfect there. Still needs a little bit of a good wash, but it's a nice sizable cabbage. I've got at least 2 more of these, so let's go get them. This one's bigger. That is such a cool and thorough harvesting method. Look. See, here's the one we just harvested. Oh, and here's the first one. This one's a lot bigger. And don't you worry, these buggy little leaves are not going to go to waste. The chickens are going to love them. That one is good and firm. We might grab that one. Just that one's firm too. Really cool thing I noticed with this one is this cabbage is putting on 2 heads. I have never seen that before, but I've actually got 2 cabbages putting on 2 heads. Look at this. There's one head here, and there's a head happening in here, though it's, oh yeah, it's down there. This head is a lot smaller. Isn't that neat? But this big head over here, this one definitely needs to come out. So this is our harvest so far. A good heap of peas here and 3 cabbages. So there are some cabbages there that could come out today. They don't really seem to have very many bug issues, and we are slotted to have another couple days of relatively cool weather. So I think I'm gonna leave them here so that I can focus on preserving these. In the past, we have just kept cabbage in the refrigerator for quite a long time. We wrap it in like an old grocery bag, plastic bag, and put it in the fridge. And honestly, they stay fresh in there for months and months. Sometimes you might have to peel a wilty outer leaf off, but they last in the refrigerator a really long time if you have the space. We've also made sauerkraut, and that is a favorite. I have done a canned coleslaw, which is delicious, and you can use your steam canner for it or your water bath canner. I'll put a link to that recipe in the description box below. So we'll be doing all the above to preserve all these cabbages this year, and we're also going to be freeze drying some cabbage and seeing how that works out. But on to the garlic. Alrighty, so last time we were in the garden, we took a peek at some of the garlic that's underneath the ground, and it is absolutely ready. You can also tell above the ground it looks kind of sick. It's falling over. It's not sick, it's just reached the end of this cycle of its life, and it's ready to be harvested. So what I'm going to do to harvest this garlic is to get down to the head and reach my hand up under it and gently lift the garlic from underneath. If you pull the garlic out by the neck, you actually risk breaking it, and you want to keep that intact, because if you leave the center of the bulb open like that, it just isn't going to store as long. So this is the hardneck variety of garlic that I just saw for sale at our local Amish grocery store. Hardneck varieties are the ones that put up that center scape. We've already broken those off and fermented them. And I find that in our area, the hardneck varieties tend to do best, and for me, they store pretty well. So I'm gonna try to leave as much soil as I can in the bed, but get all these bad boys out. So this here is an example of a garlic bulb that may be a little bit past the prime time for harvesting. I might have let this sit in the ground a little bit too long. You can see that the cloves are kind of starting to separate out from the bulb. There's really nothing wrong with this. This is just a bulb that I'm gonna want to use sooner or preserve in some kind of other way other than just curing it and storing it dry and whole. Now that the garlic is out, it's not all done yet. I do need to set these up to cure, and I'll show you the simple way that I do that. Okay, we're underneath my messy carport right now, but this is where I have this little rack. It's just got some chicken wire, and what this is going to do is allow for optimal airflow so that we can get garlic that is really dry like this. So this is actually the bulb of garlic that I harvested last week. I set it here. I can feel that it still has a little bit of moisture in the neck, so this still needs to sit for another couple weeks. I'll let it sit out here with the rest of the garlic, and my carport here is going to protect this from sun, it's going to protect it from rain, but it also is going to have a nice little cross breeze, and so this is a perfect spot to cure these garlic. You don't really want to try and rinse off any of the soil or anything like that. It's perfectly fine for them to cure and dry with the soil on there, and once they're all cured, it's really easy to wipe that dirt off. Over next to where we harvested the garlic right here, we have elephant garlic. That's gonna have to come out really soon too. Probably next week we'll tackle that. Our nightshade bed over here is looking really well, except for I have noticed that we are coming across some, this looks like flea beetle damage to me. You'll kind of know it just based on their name. They're little tiny beetles and they jump like fleas, but this is classic flea beetle damage. It looks like someone took a buckshot to the leaves, and I have treated these leaves with an organic spray, but I think I probably should have diluted it because I happened to burn more than just these plants. I burned quite a few plants with that spray, and I'll show you that in the greenhouse when we go in there later. But I did just buy some diatomaceous earth, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab that, and hopefully we can save these plants. There is a lot of damage though. Diatomaceous earth is little tiny bodies of very small sea creatures that happens to be really pointy, and you don't really want to be breathing this stuff in. And what it does is it actually kind of enters or gets in the little plates that make up the exoskeletons of insects and sort of dries them out, kind of rips them up, and then they die. So you want to be careful not to breathe this stuff in, but all I do is sprinkle a little bit on top of and around the plants, and it does generally take care of things. Now, we do get quite a lot of dew here, so that moisture that kind of sits on things in the morning time. And so I will have to reapply this if this doesn't take care of it. Usually, if there's a flea beetle or any other infestation, the pest crawls across it quite quickly, and they are taken care of by the diatomaceous earth quite quickly, and you don't need a whole bunch either. So this big old bag, it's gonna last forever. So I noticed that our peppers are starting to put on little bitty flowers. So the reason for the yellowing here is I bought these peppers from a local nursery, and they had a shade cloth over their greenhouse, and then I kind of thrust them out into the sun. So they got a little bit of sun shock, but they're starting to come back. You can see that the new growth is nice and green. The peppers that I started from seed too are pretty much catching up to the ones that I bought from the greenhouse, which makes me really happy. So there's a lot happening over here, including some blooming cactus. So these blooms were a lot prettier earlier in the day when the sun was shining on them. The bees absolutely love these things. You can see the bumblebees rolling around in them, having the best time, and I just love them as well. So my mom had actually been watching some of the garden tours, and she asked about this plant. She said, "What is that plant that's shading out your cactus?" And I said, "That's actually a rhubarb." I am able to harvest from this rhubarb. I just have to be really careful because some of the little spines in this cactus can get into the stalks that you harvest, and that would not be fun to bite into. I have actually already done one harvest off of this rhubarb plant, and it looks like I can probably harvest again. Look at that. Yeah, I'm gonna wait a couple days and then come in here and take some of these. You can see there's some ants over here. Some diatomaceous earth could help with that as well, but I think for now I'm just gonna leave it alone. There are some kales that are officially getting shaded out over here. I tasted them and they're starting to get bitter, which means they're going to seed, and I will allow it. This bee balm here, she will not be ignored any longer. So there's going to be some really pretty red, really intricate and unique looking flowers on here. I didn't do anything with them last year, but I plan to make some teas and some salves using the bee balm flowers this year. And this lovely towering beauty. This is a volunteer lettuce that I said a couple weeks ago that I really needed to pick and eat. And when I went to pick it and eat it, I tasted it first and it was also bitter. So I've decided just to leave this to go to seed and hopefully get some more lettuce later on in the year or even next year. So lettuce plants are normally quite short and they have a tight growth pattern. But when you start to see them getting tall in the middle, that's when you know that they're probably going to go to seed. You can see we're getting some little bit of a seed head here. The flowers on lettuce plants are really pretty. I'll make sure to show them to you when it happens. They're almost like little yellow daisies. I actually had some of the lettuces that I started much earlier in the year suddenly decide to take off, but unfortunately I tasted these as well, and they're also quite bitter and probably will go to seed soon. It's okay, I'm gonna let it. And a couple of these flowers on our elderberry, these flower heads, starting to bloom. So it's not quite like lilacs, but it's super close as far as the aroma. See if I can bend it down. Look at how huge. So lovely. This is probably the thing that makes me the happiest in this whole garden. Surprisingly, I have not noticed my honeybees over here yet. They will be here. There's going to be a lot of blooms, and a lot of blooms attract the bees. I happen to know that we have, or we don't have, but there is a cluster of persimmon trees that's in bloom across the street. That's where the bees are. They're barely on the clover because they're favoring that persimmon. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see them. Look, there they go. I'll talk more about this in a vlog coming up, but I just moved our little chickens that we bought for, you know, the next crop of eggs or egg layers. I just put them out here in this pen, and this is the first time I've seen them venture out into the grass. They've been in here a couple days and they've been hiding in that little shelter. So we'll make our way to the greenhouse by visiting the lane. And this lane of trellis is where I am growing a whole bunch of vining things. So we've got cucumbers, we have melons, there's different varieties of squash on here. And I did have a lot of that already planted, but something came through and mowed it all down. As does happen sometimes. I don't know if it's rodents, I don't know if it's cutworms, I don't know if it's like a possum or something like that. But the best way that I have found to combat that is to put down these cups and kind of surround the plant. It lets them get a little bit bigger and a little bit more sturdy before they need to encounter something like that. It just provides a barrier that keeps those pests away. So I have replanted a lot of things, but you can see the cup I have here, and it's secured with these clips so that the wind doesn't blow it away. But see how that's protected in there? A determined rodent is going to be able to find their way in there, but there's just something about it. If it's that much more work, they leave it alone. You can see down into these little cups, there's a whole bunch of stuff just raring to come up. And this black hose that you see weaving in along the lane here, this is actually a drip irrigation. This is my favorite way to water anything that's in a row. So in our raised bed garden, we actually have sprinklers that provide water when it doesn't rain. And while it's not ideal to have water from above, because that can promote disease when the leaves are kind of perpetually wet, or off and on the leaves get wet. But in that space, because of how it's configured, that's what makes the most sense. But drip irrigation watering underneath, this keeps the leaves dry as often as they can be dry when there isn't rain. And it actually helps to save water. So if you can put down drip irrigation, it's actually quite economical if you don't have a huge space. We get our drip tape and all of that from Grower Solution, and I'll link that in the description. So the drip line for the lane comes out and is actually hooked up to that hydrant over there. We've got the boys blocked off from it. Hello, boys. Hello, boys. There's actually quite a few goats in here, but they look like they've turned in for the evening. So hopefully my vision for the lane comes to fruition, and around a month or so, things should start climbing. Fingers crossed. If you were with me last year, you'll see that the high tunnel here isn't as grand as it once was. This is going to be relatively low-key this year. I'm gonna do what I can just to plant beans. I am having issues in here with germination. Something's coming along and eating them, so I think I'm gonna have to start some bean seeds in start pots, which I have done. Actually, this whole row right here is black-eyed peas, and I started these in start pots and they look really good. But actually all along in here, I had started some bush beans, and there are some coming up, but see, there's holes where there's nothing. So I'll get some seeds in some pots soon. Good thing about beans is there's a really quick turnaround on those. And so we'll probably have several successions of beans in here. This whole row here is squash. Some of them are a lot bigger because I started them a lot earlier in the season. This is a scallop type summer squash. You can see here, look, little tiny thing. But see here, this is the damage I was talking about from that organic spray that I used. There's nothing wrong with the spray that I used. I just probably should have diluted it because I did burn some of the leaves on my plants. I don't dare say it out loud, but I will for you guys. The squash bugs and squash vine borers seem to have not found the squash inside this high tunnel. And that was one of the goals for growing squash in here, was not only can I maybe hide them from those bug predators, but the things like the diatomaceous earth that I sprinkle on as a way to, you know, take care of those pests organically, things like BT I will use on plants like this. Those things, once applied in here, stay on a lot longer because the dew doesn't settle in here and the rain doesn't fall on the plants in here. The only bad thing, or one of the bad things about growing a squash plant in a situation like this, is high tunnels can get a little bit humid and there is a little bit less airflow, even though we have them right next to the wall over here where it's open and we have ventilation fans and everything. They can be prone to powdery mildew. I can't tell right now if that is starting or if this is just the sheen of this particular leaf, but I did notice that we do have a Siamese twin squash under here. This is actually the delicata squash, and it looks like this one is going to be doing well. This little squash was one of the first ones that came on, and I'm going to guess that that isn't going to do well. You can kind of see that it's a little bit shrivelly. So just like the pest species have a hard time finding plants in a situation like this, so do the pollinators. So I have hand pollinated squash plants in the high tunnel. I did it last year with a tromboncino squash, and so I may have to do that, and that's no problem. Well, I'm gonna get inside. I can smell that Levi has venison on the grill. Thank you so much for joining me in the garden today, and I will see you again soon, if I can get out of here.